Hello and welcome to the Ski Racing Podcast with me, Ed Drake. Joining me on this third episode is Luke Steyn and Ben Clark as we're here to finish off discussing the World Cup 2020 World Cup Tour, as well as look forward to the Summers programme and into next winter's 2021 season. Guys, let's start off with how are the athletes going to be dealing with this period at the moment, and how does the situation that we're in with the coronavirus affect summer training?
Well, if you follow just the Austrian racers on Instagram, they appear to be setting each other weird challenges for their off-season fitness. I've seen them doing kick-ups with toilet roll, which is offensive because I can't find any anywhere. And also games like trying to get up off laying down on the floor with a can on their head. They seem to be in pretty good spirits, but obviously we know in the background they're doing this because they're all basically in their own home chalets, doing home workouts, pretty bored out of their mind. I think we discussed before they'd normally be out testing skis.
Yeah.
They'd be on the spring snow, seeing how fast the new skis are going to be for next year. If
Absolutely.
Anyone's planning on swapping, they'll be testing that. But now it's just fitness all the way.
Yeah, I think it will favour the speed skiers a little bit more than the tech skiers because it seems at this stage a little bit more likely to still be able to ski in South America. So the speed skiers will still be able to make their way over there, whereas the tech skiers who would usually stay in Europe would have to look at other plans or go to New Zealand. Maybe they'll be joining the speed skiers in South America too. Who knows?
I think that this period is so much, it's normally a real big conditioning block on skis. So you're usually going through a load of technique work. This period of time is usually up on the glacier doing multiple runs, looking at technique, looking at as well as all the testing of equipment. Are we going to see anybody switch brands because they've not had the chance to change and try new stuff? That's certainly going to be something that's up for grabs. We talked about it, that Razzoli chose to change skis mid-season onto something that suited his skiing more. But we're going to not see that. Like, there are plenty of athletes that will be looking to move around due to the end of contracts, due to just the fact that they need to find some better form on some different equipment. So we're not going to have any sort of testing. I was chatting to Mike Pulaski, who's one of the Norwegian coaches, Scottish, used to be one of my coaches, but he's now works for the Norwegians. And he was saying that they've got about 6 or 7 plans set up for the summer based on what they're allowed to do. They've got indoor camps planned, they've got European trips planned, they've got New Zealand, they've got South America, but at the moment they're just scrambling, and it's going to be the same for everybody. But we're going to have some absolute monster athletes coming back from this. We're going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger style size athletes as the only thing that they're going to be able to do for months is pick up and put down
Lift and eat.
heavy stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Norwegians will continue to be massive.
Yeah, and continue to just blitz the fitness training.
Yeah.
And so I wonder whether that's going to have an effect. I think it's going to be something that, you know, the athletes are going to have to deal with in terms of it's going to test their mental strength as well. Being stuck in one place, as we all are potentially going to experience more and more of over this period, being isolated, being on your own, being stuck, especially up in the mountains and stuff. It's quite an isolating environment. Some will thrive, but others will need that camaraderie to make sure that they're able to train properly.
And I think it's going to be a lesson in, but we'll probably see early next season who has the most discipline in this period of time, because if they're not in a gym with their coaches and conditioners around them, making sure they're putting in the right kind of work, you're going to see at the start of next year who has the motivation and the discipline to do those training programs by themselves. So the coaches and the backroom staff will be working, like you said, Mike said, they'll be working their absolute tails off to get as many programs set up as possible. All of the individual kind of fitness training programs will go out to these guys, and they're then going to need to put it into motion. And if they can't be disciplined and focused enough, we're probably going to see that at the start of next season or whenever the racing starts again.
Yeah.
It could potentially also favour the sort of more experienced athletes because they don't necessarily need the hours on the skis compared to the younger athletes. So, you know, maybe we'll see them the old guys put in some good results next season because they've got the experience, they've skied the hills. They don't necessarily need to be putting in, 15 runs a day in the off season.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a factor. I think as an athlete goes through their career, in skiing terms anyway, you tend to do less on snow as you get older. Just
unless
because,
you're Dave Riding.
Unless you're Dave Riding, who's doing 1,000 runs all of the time. But actually, no, Dave took a longer break than he'd ever taken before at the end of last season, and he said it actually revitalised his summer training, and so that was sort of focus that he'd spun on it. But I think it's going to be very important. The sports science are going to have their work cut out, I think, for a lot of this summer if we're going to have some happy athletes and also have athletes that have had time to test stuff. Does this mean the whole testing block gets later? Everything gets a bit more crunched as we come into the start of next season, which is going to be sold and come the end of October, which is going to come around super quick, especially if you can't ski.
Yeah, and also the other thing is ski factories making skis.
Very true.
That's going to be a real question. You'll probably find the junior athletes just coming up through Fizz are not going to be able to buy the 3-4 sets of slalom and GS skis that they would usually be able to buy.
They're going to be relying on old stuff.
Yeah, here's your 2019 stock you guys can race on this year.
Yeah, they'll be what they will be very good at is making new top sheets just to roll over the old stuff, but making sure, don't forget to make sure that those plates are made smaller by the amount of the
size of the top sheet.
Bit of prick stick,
yeah,
slap in a new design, great.
Job done. So no, that's a very good point. In terms of kit manufacturing, is definitely going to be taking a hit. The factories have shut down, or in the process of shutting down. So the best of the best are still going to get their gear, but the rest of the field, your 30 to your maybe even 20 to 50th ranked skiers are not going to get access to kit that they've been used to over the past few years. So it's going to be tough on that. Let's move forward to a British perspective, shall we? Let's start with how, as a team, I think it's safe to say that the Brits have had a very successful year. I don't think, in terms of Dave Riding, that his season maybe hasn't been as good as he'd wanted it to, but it's still a successful season. But the rest of the team seems to be gathering around him, and we're moving forward as a unit.
As he said on Instagram, I think he has a lot to be proud of. It's his 4th season with a top 15 result. That's not anything to be
absolutely not
embarrassed about. I think, especially as he gets older, that it's not going to make it easiest. So to see him, put in another good overall result like that.
Yeah, consistent. Again,
it was heartbreaking at the beginning of the season to see that Levy, Levy incident. I don't know if you guys feel it, but I feel pain when he feels pain.
Yeah, it's safe to say that British fans have to live every single turn with Dave, every single mistake, every single ooh and ah.
Yeah.
We're all there living and breathing it. So, and I know that he is well aware of external pressure, but he's quite good at sort of keeping to himself. Him and Tristan and Jai, those guys are really able to keep this sort of really nice, tight-knit group and able to keep the focus moving forward. But what about the rest of the team, guys?
I mean, this was a pretty strong year again from Alex Tilley. We talked a little bit about it. The start of the season, I think previously last year she had a few flashes of runs, whereas this year she put a lot more second runs in. Maybe not in some cases quite as strong as she'd wanted to, but at the same time, I'd say this was a successful season. Yes, an individual result could have been better along the way. I mean,
but
next
still
year,
steps in the right direction, though.
Definitely. Huh? Next year she'll want to see if they can just put races in Killington every week, as she had that great weekend, and that's what I'm probably putting a lot of this on. She had a weekend where she scored in GS and slalom.
Yeah.
I think that focus on slalom helped her a bit this year as well, adding on just not being so focused on just one thing the whole time. I think really freed her up a little bit to express herself a bit more in GS, and that really worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Those results in Killington right at the beginning of the season, so important that they set you up for the rest of the rest of the winter. That I think that she had a couple of dips. She had a bit of an injury through the end of Jan, which just sort of hampered that sort of progression of results going through. But in general, I don't think talent is questionable when it comes to Alex Tilley and the way that she skis. I think it's about headspace and consistency when it comes to how she skis, because she has these monster runs, these beautiful sections of skiing where you're like, this is what we are hoping to see more of, and I think the closest we saw to the 2 runs was definitely Killington in terms of a results base. But she's still a relatively young athlete, so she's already got a lot of miles under her feet. So in terms of how she's been going, I think it's a really good season, and her and Noel Baxter have been working together really well and building on some really good results. Sticking with the ladies side of things, we have finally seen, and that's not a dig, but we've finally seen some World Cup results from Charlie Guest.
So Charlie Guest, she came off the back of last season with an injury, has worked really hard to rehab. I think it was her knee, and come back. And like you said, she's got some great World Cup results in the top 30. But not only that, she's had some good Europa Cup successes on the podium and in first. I think in one of the last races, Europa Cup, she had a bit of a crash and when she was gonna hit the podium possibly, so that was a little bit disappointing. But I mean, what a season to come back to after being injured.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it a few times over the season with Charlie, what kind of wanting her to make those second runs and start to get a foothold the way we were talking about with Alex a few years ago, is just kind of get a grip onto that second run. And once you've done it once, the belief in yourself goes up. And then when you go back to Europa Cups, you're like, I can compete with the best women in the world, so I can definitely win these races. And you can slowly see that confidence building. Absolutely. And I can't wait to see what the next couple of years have got to offer in that space.
Yeah, I think having now scored World Cup points, and it was in a parallel slalom, so she hasn't yet scored points in a classic slalom, but the fact that she scored points in a World Cup event in front of the best, that's going to build confidence. All of these real solid building blocks of results that she's now had in Europa Cup means that it's everything is moving in the right direction for her. But key for her is going to be able to stay injury free, because she's had back issues, knee issues, and seems to be constantly 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. And if she can keep healthy and strong, she's got the skill set again. It's a really nice position to be in. We're going to say the same thing about a lot of the British racers, that they've got a lot of good skill sets, but it's about taking the opportunities when they arise. And I think that we saw Charlie take advantage of a good performance in the qualification rounds of the parallel slalom. And if she can just again use that as the stepping stone, as the building block, as the drive into the classic slalom, means that she's going to be heading to a consistent place within the top 30.
And another thing which you guys really talked about in the podcast with Mark Telling and Finlay Mickle was that, as a smaller nation, it's quite often difficult to feel like you deserve to be in a certain position.
Yes.
So, you feel like sort of timid when you turn up at races, especially, I can imagine, Charlie turning up at the World Cup race, hasn't scored any points yet. And
feel like you're making up the numbers.
Feel like you're making up the numbers. But then to score points, and it's you completely change your character because you feel like you deserve to be there. I have scored 4 points in the past. I've just come off podiums in Europa Cup. I feel like I should be here, rather than sort of like, as Mark Telling said, that the British kids in the cafe in the corner not really speaking to the rest of the athletes. So I think that's been a massive turning point. Not only that, we've seen it on the men's side too, especially in Kitzbühel, which was a massive highlight for me, where Dave Riding and Laurie Taylor, 2 British guys, finishing in scoring points in World Cup, which was amazing to see. So feeling like you deserve to be there, I think is a big thing the Brits have felt more of in the last couple years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that performance in Kitzbühel, with both guys getting on the podium, if only, getting points in that World Cup, was huge. And I think for Laurie, we talked about how important it was for Charlie getting World Cup points, and for Laurie it's exactly the same. Getting points. We've heard so many stories from coaches about Laurie being, super fast in training. He's one of the most naturally gifted athletes that we've ever seen in British skiing. But we haven't seen that in World Cup, and we've now seen that performance on the first run. Yes, the second run he took his foot off the gas, skied to finish, which is never going to give you a good overall performance, but it's again a step in the right direction. And you're 100% right that you can't underestimate the importance of feeling like you belong and feeling like you've earned your spot there. And I think that that is going to be a huge turning point for all of the British athletes, and one that hopefully we will see Charlie Raposo get on board with relatively soon.
Yeah, Charlie had a very hit and miss season. Every time we spoke to him, it seemed to be another injury, just stopping him being able to get a solid block of training in. He missed a few races. There was when they went over to the States, didn't tie in with when he could race. And then obviously we saw the Adelboden race where he was looked on course. All his splits were just inside making the 30 and those elusive points, and then that silly gate at the bottom with the big hole in it, or the big road. Came and took him out just a couple gates from the finish, which was, I mean, we said it with Dave, like you gasp when he makes a mistake and you're roaring and I was so gutted when he went down.
But to be fair, I think he's quite happy because it came up on screen and he got a load of good laughs and he got a massive cheer for it. So I think that,
and a few more followers on Instagram.
Exactly, all important.
Sorry, Charlie. No, look, I love the kid. I think he worked tremendously hard this last summer. Maybe sort of got distracted at certain parts throughout the season. Don't want to call him out for that because it's not easy. It's a long season. Yeah. And
it's intense, really intense.
And mentally, like the ups and downs are quite horrific. Like, one day you feel on top of the world, the next day you don't, especially with throw a couple of injuries in there. Yeah. It's not such a sort of easy place to be level-headed. I think he will be disappointed in that he didn't score points, like Laurie did. But, I would only encourage him to not think of it like that. He is still 23, 24 years old. Yeah. So he's got a long career ahead of him. I mean, I reckon the average age of winning has gone up in the last 5 years for sure. So, there's no reason, and as shown by Dave, there's no reason why he can't be there for another 4 or 5 years.
At least.
So,
if he can, but the key, I think, to Charlie's career longevity, as well as getting to the sharp end of it, is staying injury free. Yeah. And I think for him, he's being a relatively young athlete, has had probably more than his fair share of injuries, and it's tricky, and it takes dogged determination in the gym, serious single-minded focus to be able to put yourself in a condition physically to deal with the physical challenges that it takes racing World Cup, but also dealing with accidents and crashes, which is a huge part of conditioning. So it's not going to be easy at all, but if he can stay injury free, he's got a good shot.
I think we've seen this season that the talent and speed is there. Yeah. He's got what he needs to do. It's just now making it happen, and when there are so many cancellations and moving of races was a really difficult year. And if we have a slightly more normal season next year, he'll have a lot more of an opportunity coming in fresh to actually get that good result out of the way early, get that second run, and then really start to build the confidence from there. Because we've seen it similar, as we were saying with Charlie. We've seen it in the Europa Cups. He's put in some really good performances in there. Yeah. That's where the speed is there. You look at the people he's beaten there, and you're like, well, those guys are making second runs. He can do this. Yeah. Let's just see him start next season healthy, fresh, and motivated.
Okay, let's move on to next topic. We've got a few retirees to get through. A few Germans. Fritz Dopfer is hanging up his boots, 9 podiums. Unfortunately, never quite got the elusive win. Christina Ackermann, formerly Geiger, is also hanging up the boots. Mats Olsson from Sweden, again, feeling like it's time to call it a day. He's not actually that old. He's only 31 years old, but I feel like he's just said he's lost the love for it. It's time for him to hang up his boots. Nina Harver-Loseth, 166 World Cup starts, 8 podiums, 2 wins, and probably the biggest name to chuck in the towel is Andre Mura. 250 wins, 30 podiums, 250 starts, 30 podiums, 8 wins, Olympic champion and World Cup Globe winner.
That's a pretty good resume to finish up on. It's a bit of a shame the season ended so prematurely, but he did have those results early in the year, and we were like, oh, has Mura made a good decision to come back? Because we remember last year, he made a big deal of retiring
after World Champs
after the World Champs in Are, but then I think his retirement kind of got lost in the whirlwind of the Hall of Fame retirements of Svindal and Lindsey Vonn. It was like, maybe I'll do another season and my retirement can be a bigger deal next season.
Coronavirus, no final race, thanks very much.
Yeah, and Nina Harvalota is a strange one because I think she's only 31, which really isn't that old in racing terms. When you think of how long the likes of Vonn went on, she certainly showed at times this year that she was more than able to compete. But I guess it's one of those things. If you're not feeling it anymore and you feel the time's right, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean they're long tours, right? It's not just the winter either. It's you do give up your life. In reality, you do it for something beautiful and lucky enough to be able to, for these guys especially, being able to make a living out of doing this. But it takes over your whole life. So I think for a lot of these athletes, it's going to be easy for them to go, I've had a good career, I maybe only be 31, but I want to do something else.
Yeah, no, definitely another chapter in her life, I'm sure, is to come. But yeah, not as big a names as on the retirement list as last year. But yeah. I think
there's one more retiree that I forgot to mention. Hans Knaus, who retired from racing a fair few years ago, but he's now retiring from the camera runs. So no more camera runs.
That's the biggest disappointment.
That's the big story. That's over
story.
600 apparently. The stats say. So no more camera runs for Big Hans Knaus.
Who's going to take over?
Get your CV in there, Ed.
Yeah, just not the slaloms.
No. So, one, not the slaloms, and two, I don't really speak German, so I just oohs and ahs. I'll be in.
And who does it for the Brits?
Graham Bell.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, big Graham Bell still chucking out a few runs.
Yeah.
He's still as eager ever as to get on those skis and go down Kitzbühel. I can't think of anything worse.
Thank you.
I mean, it's struggled enough to do the Super G there as an athlete. There's no chance I'm sticking it on as a
holding the camera in one hand.
But yeah, so loads of guys hanging up the boots. But I expect we'll see a few more announcements because when all the teams are announced for the next season, there'll definitely be some athletes missing out on this on the national teams. And I think when you start missing out on your national team spot, I think that's when athletes decide that it's probably time for me to call it a day.
You have two options: either switch nationality or retire.
Yeah, do a bit of switching. Yeah, so
I mean, any of those that you think are gonna maybe miss the spots?
De Gruber.
Yeah,
been saying it all season.
Yeah. Brutal.
Gone.
No.
I mean, we've been saying he needs to, he was constantly starting in the late 20s and barely getting second runs or not getting second runs. He just had a really bad injury in the last race. We've seen from Gestrein and Pertl that they have youngsters that can take those spots.
Yeah.
Is he really going to come back from that injury? He wasn't young by any stretch of the imagination. Granted, he's not like 36 or anything, but he hasn't podiumed. I mean, I don't know what he does in training that makes
he's obviously
him keep bringing him back. But when you've got the guys like Matt, Schwartz and Feller who can podium, and then you've got the younger guys hungry for spots and really looking for it, I can't see him coming back. He'll probably put all the fitness in and he'll work really hard to come back, but it'll be interesting to see if the Austrians,
Well, they still could give him a spot on the team, but fighting for places, and if you're there or thereabouts, unless you're beating them by a decent margin, you're not going to get the nod over Pertl, who's or somebody like Pertl, who's a youngster coming through. Yeah. So I think that it's going to be a case of, I think we'll see a couple of athletes hanging up the boots midsummer maybe. But I do think the sad thing for all of these athletes that have announced retirements, that they didn't get to do their last World Cup race. They didn't get to do all that sort of stuff. We've seen some cool performances with like Kush dressing up in his crazy stuff. We saw Hansdotter do it last year in all of her national dress. Yeah. And we've seen a load of that sort of fun sort of farewells.
And Kuzona, Superwoman.
Yeah, exactly. And so this time we've got no opportunity to really sort of say thank you and goodbye to some of the biggest names. Andre Mura, like I say, Olympic champion. Who you don't get to say cheerio, thanks very much, and you've been a legend of the sport. The guy's been around for such a long time. One of my favourite memories about the guy is racing in Adelboden. He came over. He straddled just before you break over onto the steep pitch. And all you see is him coming over that roll. He's got his pole over his shoulders and just effortlessly snap the pole over his back, and you're just like, it's just effortlessly cool. I'd be there like trying to snap my pole, just like smashing myself in the leg.
They're like Christopherson's. They're like,
yeah, just break it, and then you're going, oh crap, no, I can't break it. And now you've started, so you've got to try and finish. And my favourite one of those was this guy. I remember racing. I think he was Belgian, and we were at a race, and there's like when you doesn't go your way, like to have a bit of a hissy fit, you kind of see it. You see it fairly often. You don't see it that often at World Cup, barring Christopherson maybe, but it's sort of lower down the echelons of ski racing. You see it a bit. And I remember seeing this guy, he took off his helmet and he drop kicks his helmet about 30 metres. And then, obviously, in a fit of rage, does that. And then the best bit about it is the realisation that he's going to have to trudge over 30 metres and pick up his helmet and put it back on and leave again. There's nothing more than like, to bring you down to earth. It's like, you've definitely paid for that. That's not a gimme. And
you probably got to do a second run too.
Yeah, exactly. Right down the bottom of the hill in front of everybody. But yeah.
I was also had a feeling that Ligeti was going to retire this year.
Yeah, but he's all of a sudden put in a real, some good performances right at the end of the winter. He's doing a bit on the Pro Tour. He's seemingly enjoying his ski racing, so who knows?
I'm probably getting paid enough still.
Well, with the Shred legacy, like he's that's...
Money's not an issue.
The guy's not, he's not doing this for cash.
No, sure.
The guy's doing it because he loves ski racing, and he obviously still thinks that he's got some skills. And I think it's safe to say we all think he's got some skills because the guy's all of a sudden breathed new life into his skiing and his performances. So the guy's on form.
Are we going to see an age 41 Julian Lizaru on the tour next year?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
A rapping Lizaru.
I mean, him and JB Grange just seem to be timeless.
Well, Grange just put in some of his best performances for like 10 years. So the guy, I think he's going to be here for Grange, I don't think it's going.
And that tech team does seem to have a really close bond. And I think Noel really feeds off their energy. I think Lizaru is just a constant ball of excitement about ski racing.
Keeps everything moving.
And JB Grange is just he's a double world champion. Yeah. He's won the Tour slalom title, and he can just keep dropping little bits of advice in to Noel. There's been a couple times where Noel's been leading runs and bailed on the second run.
Absolutely.
And JB Grange will just be able to just keep like guiding him in the right direction, not letting him get too down on himself, not letting him get too kind of caught up in the hype when he does have a couple of good races. And I think they're a really good little squad, those guys.
Absolutely. Right, what about thoughts for next season?
Can we have some races?
One, I'd like some races, and two, I'd like some consistent snow conditions would be handy.
Some snow, some sun, less wind, less viruses.
No powders or viruses.
Yeah. We've said a few times, this year was a nightmare for organisers. We talked about the possibility of adding in extra days, rest days, reserve days, whatever you want to call them, something so that we can have more weekends happen. I just want to see some racing that we get as much of the calendar as possible. I really want to see some good contests. I want to see Paris back.
Yes.
I want that battle we were robbed of to kick straight back in. I want to see, Schifrin Vlahova Part 2 go off again. I want to see Marcel Hirscher come out of retirement. It's not going to happen, but I want to see it.
Still hoping this is going to happen.
There's so much to look forward to next year, and all we can say is what we talked about before. Let's just hope the issues with the virus pass and these guys can get back to their work in the summer.
What about you, Luke? What are you hoping to see other than some racing?
Well, I guess at the tail end of last season, we wanted to figure out who was going to take the lead from Hirscher, and that was so uncertain this season. So I think a lot of athletes, once they've had time to ponder, will come away and be like, okay, well, I kind of thought I was going to be that guy, Pinterau and Christopherson.
Bit of missed opportunity.
Yeah, missed opportunity. So I think they'll be really working hard this summer. And so I think next season we're going to see some serious racing and some serious competitions, some close calls, which I'm really excited for. On the women's side, Brunoni has shown that she is, on par with Schifrin. Hopefully
and
we can
Vlahova,
get and Vlahova, and hopefully we can get through a whole season with them all being there, and then really decide who's the best.
Yeah, because unfortunately, like I think pretty much all sport this year, this season, are going to have asterisks by them, right? And I think regardless of if you deserved it or didn't deserve it, which I think if you got to this point where we cancelled races in the lead, you kind of do deserve it, regardless of how many races were left. But there's always going to be the asterisks of, well, we finished, 2 weeks early. Schifrin missed a bunch of races. This, that, and the other caveats left, right, and centre. And I think actually, if we can just get through this next season and we are not robbed of all these different factors, then it's going to be a bumper season. Also, don't forget we're going to have with the Olympics now from next season. So we've got next season which has world champs in, and then it's the Olympics already. So we missed the Beijing test event for the ladies. So the men's test event's due to be this coming winter. So the ladies are going to have to do their test event as well. So all of a sudden, it's starting to, pressure is going to be on to make sure that we get all the races done, especially get the Chinese races done. If we, hopefully, fingers crossed, all this stuff doesn't last that long, but get to be able to start racing it and sort of the athletes build up to the Olympic Games isn't hampered at all.
And what they'll probably have to do is put those Beijing events maybe after Lake Louise, because if they get cancelled, they're going to have to try and rerun them before the end of the season.
They may have to move them.
They have to put them early.
Something are going to have to look at. To make sure.
I wouldn't like to be Fizz right now. That's all I'm saying.
No, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of speculation. But I think luckily for Fizz, all sports seem to be in the same situation. So with alpine skiing, we're not alone. In winter sports, we're not alone in global sports. So actually, I think that that Fizz, I don't know, I guess you can almost take cues from everybody else. Somebody's going to take the hit first. Fizz don't really have to do an awful lot of stuff before we get round to the sort of midway through the summer before they have to start making decisions. It's going to be the rest of the sport that's going to have to deal with the imminent decisions about going back to competition and what we're going to do going forward and finish off seasons. Our season, thankfully, yes, we're short, but we're finished.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we got time for. Guys, thank you very much for joining me again. To Ben, to Luke, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.